Russell's paradox is one of those mind-bending ideas that seem simple at first, until you realize it shakes the very foundations of mathematics. Imagine a library that contains every book except those that list themselves in the catalogue. Now, what happens if the librarian decides to create a new catalogue that lists all books that do not include themselves? Should the catalogue include itself or not? If it does, it contradicts its own rule. If it doesn't, then it belongs in the list. This tangled web perfectly illustrates the contradiction that Bertrand Russell uncovered, a problem so fundamental that it forced mathematicians to rethink the structure of logic itself. At the beginning of the 20th century, mathematicians were trying to build a solid, universal foundation for logic and set theory. The idea was simple: sets are just collections of objects, and we should be able to define them in clear, logical ways. But in 1901, Russell found something deeply troubling. He discovered that naive set theory, the straightforward system that mathematicians had been using, contained a contradiction so serious that it threatened the entire field of mathematics. Let's break it down. Consider everyday sets: the set of all cats, the set of prime numbers, or even the set of all books in a library. These sets are easy to understand. But what happens when we ask a more abstract question? Let's define a set, called R, as the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Now, the question is, does R contain itself? If R belongs to itself, then it contradicts its own defining rule, because it is supposed to contain only sets that do not contain themselves. But if R does not belong to itself, then it should belong to itself, since it fits the definition of sets that do not contain themselves. No matter how we try to resolve the question, we run into an endless loop. This logical paradox exposes the flaw in naive set theory and proves that something must be wrong with the way we define sets. For a mathematician, this is not just a curious puzzle, it's a crisis. Mathematics depends on carefully built systems that avoid contradictions. If a paradox exists at the heart of set theory, then the entire foundation of logic could collapse. And Russell's discovery proved that such a paradox was not just possible, it was unavoidable in the existing system. One of the first major casualties of this paradox was the work of German mathematician Gottlob Frege. Frege had spent years developing a formal system of logic, hoping to create a flawless foundation for mathematics. But when Russell sent him a letter explaining the paradox, Frege realized that his system had been completely undermined. His life's work had been shattered by a single contradiction. Mathematicians scrambled to fix the problem. Several solutions emerged, each attempting to prevent self-referential sets from causing contradictions. One approach was Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, ZF, which introduced strict rules that avoided the paradox by restricting how sets could be constructed. Another was Russell's own type theory, which categorized sets into different levels, preventing them from referring to themselves in problematic ways. A third approach was axiomatic set theory, which replaced naive assumptions with carefully structured logic. These solutions worked, preventing Russell's paradox from surfacing in modern mathematics. But the paradox remains a fascinating and essential lesson in logic, showing that seemingly simple ideas can lead to profound contradictions. Beyond mathematics, Russell's paradox touches on self-reference, a concept that appears across philosophy, logic, and even computing. A similar contradiction appears in Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which proved that no mathematical system can ever be entirely free from paradox. It's also related to the liar paradox, where a person says, "I am lying." If the statement is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. These paradoxes reveal the limits of logic, language, and even human understanding. Russell's discovery forced mathematicians to refine their definitions and rethink the foundations of set theory. It showed that paradoxes are not just obstacles, they are signposts pointing to deeper truths. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in logic, mathematics, and philosophy have come from confronting contradictions like this. In the end, Russell's paradox is more than just a quirky mathematical puzzle. It's a gateway to understanding the limits of knowledge itself. And if paradoxes like this can exist in something as fundamental as set theory, what other hidden contradictions might exist in the systems we rely on every day?